Welcome back, everyone, to The Doctor Will See You Now. And as we head into the festive season, we have a lineup for you that I am sure you are going to absolutely enjoy. As we've said at various points in our sessions here on The Doctor Will See You Now, our main aim was to bring you authors that should have been appearing at Newcastle Noir 2020. And as the year moves on, I am thrilled to be able to say those next three sessions will be bringing crime writers from the Emerald Isle, crime writers from Ireland, and looking at their work, three very different, intriguing authors. So again, if you are not familiar with these authors that will be coming to you, then now is a chance just to sit back and relax and tune in over the next 6 weeks. We'll be doing one every 2 weeks. So just to, when you've had too many mince pies or when you've had too much turkey or nut roast, a chance just to tune in with us and enjoy a good conversation. So our first author is welcome Anthony Quinn, or as it is on your novels, Anthony J. Quinn. It is wonderful to have you with us. Thank you for being here.
Thank you very much for inviting me along, Jackie.
A total pleasure. Now, we're here to celebrate, well, I think we could celebrate a number of things, and you'll understand why when we get through our conversation. But mainly we're here to celebrate the publication of, I do believe it's your 9th novel, Turncoat, is that correct?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. Published in November this year, November 2020, by the fabulous people at No Exit Press. You can be sure if it's a No Exit Press novel, it's got a quality stamp on it. And that is so true for Turncoat. Now, just to read a little bit from the publicity, it says that Turncoat probes the legacy of the Troubles, the loss of collective memories, and the moral consequences for the individual. So this is without doubt a meaty, juicy novel that asks questions of you as well, of the reader. And I always think, to be led along that path is always a good one. We have the sole survivor of a murderous ambush, a Belfast police detective, and we'll find out more about this protagonist. He's forced into a desperate search for a mysterious informer that takes him to a holy island on Loch Derg. Is that the correct pronunciation, Anthony?
Very good pronunciation, Jackie.
Yes,
Yes,
okay, Loch Derg.
couldn't
And
correct
that's
that anyway.
a place shrouded in strange mists and hazy rain where nothing is as it first appears to be. Great mystery there to be unearthed. But first and foremost, Anthony, will you tell us how you got into crime fiction writing?
Um, I've always wanted to write. I've been writing since the age of 6, really. It's something that I've always wanted to do. I did a degree in English, and I kind of spent most of my time up on the 10th floor of the library at Queen's University, reading American poetry and trying to write. And I have to confess, I didn't attend an awful lot of classes. I was more kind of interested in kind of cocooning myself. But I kind of thought to myself at the time that after I graduated, that if I devoted a year or 2 years just to writing a novel, that I might go mad, that I might just get too caught up in this kind of other world. So at that time, I decided to kind of immerse myself knee deep in reality and did a master's in social work. And then for 10 years was a mental health social worker.
Mm-hmm.
And then in those 10 years, I thought I'll go mad if I don't write a book. So we kind of, myself and my wife and our young family moved back to where I grew up in Northern Ireland, in County Tyrone. Mm-hmm. And I kind of wanted to write a novel that was about the landscape. So my first book, really, I was starting just to write about the landscape around Loch Ness. And after about 40,000 words, I thought to myself, this is just a book about mud and rain, and there's absolutely no way anybody would ever want to publish this book. So I came upon the idea of putting a dead body in the first chapter and making the next character in chapter 2 the detective. And that was my kind of beginning into crime fiction. And my kind of first detective character, Celsius Daly, the reader knew more about Daly than I did at the start, because he was this kind of conventional detective character. He was the depressive, middle-aged kind of alcoholic character that was all at sea at his professional life and his romantic life. So I kind of adopted that convention because it felt safe for me to write about the landscape of the Troubles, because there was kind of a safety around that. And also, I thought for the reader, he would feel safe as well, because I knew I was going to be taking the reader down some quite dark paths in talking about the landscape of my home, which is kind of the border area of Northern Ireland, and the kind of all the different crimes and kind of violence that's happened in that landscape, and that kind of character kind of, assured that there'll be kind of justice and order restored, that there'll be kind of that element of safety in it, but I could still bring the reader down and kind of hint at very kind of dark things at the same time. So that really was how I got into crime fiction.
Okay, so I love when you first said that even as an undergraduate, you cocooned yourself in the library on the 10th floor. I love the fact that for you, you know, it's the idea of that there's always been that drive there. You know,
Yes.
even if you're an, shall we say, unconventional student these days, COVID notwithstanding, but the idea of, the library seems to be a very alien space until the end of the semester when examinations seem to loom. That's,
Oh,
you know,
yeah. No, for me, it was a place of safety almost,
Mhm.
and a refuge, and a kind of a, maybe it wasn't all that good for me either at that time of my life, because it was a way to kind of maybe escape the pressures of student life, and of adjusting to living in a city, because I came from the countryside, and I found it quite hard to
Yes,
adjust
yeah.
to living in a city. I can remember looking down from the 10th floor window at everybody heading off to parties and thinking, perhaps I'm missing out on something here. But I think it worked out.
I would say you know, looking at that list of publications, I think probably those that time spent in the library, that time spent then going back and doing more study, I think it certainly helped. And the career in journalism as well that you've had, that input
Yes.
there, that investigative nature and things like that. Just to come back a little bit to Celsius Day, because he was a very new character to me. I must confess that before Newcastle Noir, I hadn't had the chance to get to know your work at all, and I'm just intrigued by the name. I mean, why Celsius?
There is one joke in the whole series of 5 novels, and I don't want to spoil it for the reader, because it
Okay,
happens in the middle of the first book, um, which kind of gives an explanation as to why he was called. I mean, kind of the basic reason is that there's kind of an obscure saint, and that name is kind of
great.
a it's,
That
it's, it's,
that
it's a common kind of middle name in
mhm.
certain kind of dark corners of Ulster still. The name kind of pops up here and there, but it never really has come to light. And I thought it was an interesting name, and it
Beautiful.
kind of it's kind of a little bit of an echo with Rebus, and
Yes,
Ian Rankin's great detective, who was a kind of a template, one of the templates for Celsius Daily. It was kind of borrowing on the great conventions that are within the genre already, and it allowed me to kind of write about home, which is a great thing about the conventions of crime fiction. They're so capacious; you can kind of squeeze in whatever you want to write about, whatever terrain or society.
it is. I think it's wonderful that the elasticity that there is. Yes, there are certain conventions, but I think it's one of those genres that just really lends itself to however an author wishes to pursue
Hmm.
a narrative, a character development. I think there's room within, that beautiful
Yes.
umbrella term of crime
Yes.
fiction that allows for that.
And it's yes, and it's not a static form. I mean, it's endlessly inventing itself, even in the days of Conan Doyle and Agatha Christie, there was real kind of dramatic developments within the genre, and Raymond Chandler, writers like those who now are part of the canon, they were radicals in their day, and
Yes. Yep.
which is the wonderful thing, that the genre has, that gives writers these tools to play with, and however you kind of mix them and deploy them. And if you're obsessed about a landscape, about a society, then to me they're the most effective tools to excavate the stories within that society. And as you know yourself, the good thing about the detective novel is that you're inviting the reader to kind of play the detective. So there's no other literary form like it, where you have the reader kind of, almost like a critic, like an odd detective figure with you as in the whole process.
I really appreciate the way you look at it like that, because it's also as well that it is not, I think, as the reader, and I'm sure viewers will agree, that it's not just there's a text at a distance, but it's a text that invites you to come close. It invites you to become part of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it really is the most skillful crime writers, allow us to be part of that discovery.
Mm.
And I mean, I know from a book club that I'm part of, that many of the members do love the challenge of, can we solve it before the detective does? Can we
Yes,
before?
that's
Yeah,
so key.
yeah,
And
yeah.
as you say, good writers invite the reader into the labyrinth,
Hmm.
and the reader kind of brings their own darkness almost in their own,
Hmm.
because they're playing with possibilities in their head as to what could actually happen. So the reader is adding to the novel. It's this lovely interplay between the reader's imagination and their kind of unconscious desires and fears, and how that they kind of project into the labyrinth that's in there in the book,
Definitely, definitely. Now, so the series that you've created, did you feel that you had come to an end with what you could do with that character, and hence writing Turncoat, because in Turncoat you introduce us to a very different detective in a way. There are certain similarities maybe, but I think,
Mm,
this character, and we'll come to him in a minute, but just like us to pause for a while and consider,
mm,
have you come to the end? Why did you make that change?
mm. I haven't come to the end of Daily. I took a break from Daily. I mean,
Hmm.
as writers, it's very easy for us to talk about how we project onto our detectives and onto our characters, but it's hard to talk about how our detectives project back onto us. And Daly being this kind of lonely, paranoid, introspective character, um, he kind of was turning me into a slightly more paranoid, lonely, introspective person.
Hmm.
I remember at what the kind of the last launch that I'd done for the series in Undertow, people saying that Daly was therapy for them, but I said to them, I'm going to need therapy if I
Hmm.
keep writing about Daly, so I need a little break from that. Um, I don't know really whether Turncoat counts as a break, because
I was
it's
gonna
a
say.
deeper engagement
Hmm.
with an even more guilt-ridden detective. It was my kind of attempt to write a metaphysical detective novel, and as far as I know, there hasn't been a metaphysical detective novel written about the Troubles, or set in Ireland. So I thought it was going to be new ground that I was going to break, and I thought that the metaphysical detective would kind of add to my engagement with the terrain of Northern Ireland and the Troubles. And it's the first book that I've actually set during the Troubles. The books that I've written so far either happened before or after. So it took a lot of bravery for me to actually start
Hmm.
writing about
Hmm.
that dark time, and with the belief and hope that the book would be published, because it's whether or not people want to read about that time, you have to take that into account as well. But something about the metaphysical detective novel, and this idea, the kind of the conventions of it, the kind of the idea of a labyrinth of kind of missing texts, of dark, anxious investigations, and kind of guilt-ridden detectives who kind of are searching for themselves more than for the criminal. I thought that would lend to the kind of just the nebulous conspiracies and darkness that hang over that period, like any kind of conflict in any country quite like the kind of the civil war in Spain and how society adapts to that. So I thought the Millet would lend something, and it kind of hit gold with the setting of Station Island, which is a kind of a holy island as a place of retreat. In the Troubles, it was a kind of a forgotten corner of Ulster. It was the kind of place where ordinary people whose stories weren't told in the official records of the Troubles, they went there and they kind of encapsulated their moral and spiritual striving, and they were free from the kind of people who were crushed by violence, but they kind of earned a bit of respect and dignity by going there. And while I was there, I went there and did the pilgrimage as part of the research, and I realized, well, this is the labyrinth that you see in metaphysical detective novels, in Poe and Paul Auster. This idea of spiraling paths, and so it just struck me, ironically enough, that this holy island was the perfect place for this dark noir kind of novel.
I'll come back to you in a little bit to tease more out about that island and about your own experience there. But before we do, so we talked about your first detective, but would you do me the honours and would you introduce the detective that you have created for Turncoat?
Yes, his name is Detective Desmond Maguire, and he's a more introspective, guilt-ridden form of Inspector Daly. He experienced these kind of bouts of amnesia. He's kind of overwhelmed by guilt, uncertainty. He survives this ambush at the very start. All his colleagues are killed, but he survives. It's almost like a miracle. He doesn't know why he survived this, but it's not a good miracle. It doesn't bless him, but it curses him, because it kind of suggests that violence, as orchestrated during the Troubles, was a sinister kind of powerful, menacing force, and it left people uncertain. He doesn't know why he survived, but it was arbitrary and it was chance. So that idea of chance and arbitrary survival or death was kind of a large part of the oppressive nature of living during kind of a civil conflict. So Maguire is kind of persecuted by these notions of why has he survived, and he's dragged onto this kind of guilty pilgrimage, as I've called it, to Station Island, where he's searching for his informer. It was his informer that gave him the tip off for the search that led to this ambush at the very start. So he feels completely to blame, and he's viewed perhaps as a traitor. He's viewed with great suspicion. So there's a sense of forces hunting him while he's hunting his informer. He's trying to find this mysterious informer who is described in kind of very vague terms, and it's written in the first person, which was a kind of a new development for me in the detective form, and that kind of just brings up notions of unreliability, and it's a more kind of opaque narrative form. So kind of Maguire it isn't really telling the truth. He has these kind of gaps and shadows in his storytelling. But the main thing is that the reader feels for him. I've kind of really tried to immerse the reader completely in his sense of fear and anxiety as he goes on this search for his informer. So the kind of the emotional resonance for me is really important there.
And there's also the tension as well, is there not, the fact that he is a Catholic in a Protestant police force, and so
he's
with
a
that
classic outsider.
Yeah, you bring in another element of tension there, and I wonder that dichotomy that's there, between belonging to the inside, the forces of law and order, but then being that outsider. And I felt that the positioning of him as the outsider really did enable the reader to feel sympathy, despite certain elements that were a little bit hazy, and the big question of why did he survive. But I
That
think,
really is key. Is that kind of
yes,
outsider, and the tension. That word you use, tension, is to me is really key. I mean, in every page that I write, I try to create tension. And Maguire, he's an outsider, and he's always searching for a sense of belonging, and that's what brings him back to Station Island. To kind of, that's his native territory almost. That's the touchstone of his Catholic identity in Ulster, and he goes there looking for his tribe, and he wants to belong,
mm-hmm.
but he doesn't, because he's conflicted. He belongs. He's a member of a police force, um, and there's kind of different notions of betrayal there even.
Yes,
So he's an outsider, and he's an outsider in terms of his faith, in terms of the people who he's trying to belong to, and he keeps trying to kind of dissolve his identity and belong while he's there on Station Island. But he's always on the margins, and he behaves quite badly on Station Island. I mean, he doesn't he's not there as a holy Joe. He's there with a couple of bottles of vodka, and he kind of transgresses. He's more the criminal because he breaks the rules, And for me, I thought that would be the hooks for the reader as well. That I could do justice to the kind of the special aura that is around that place and the stories around it. For thousands of years, people have been going there for the kind of the spiritual kind of reasons, But I would also make it entertaining because he's the outsider there as well.
as well, and I wonder, with him, like, as you say, he breaks the rules of taking that pilgrimage. And yet, you know, the transformative work that seems to go on, that he never set out to happen. And I think, again, your not creation, because that place exists, but the way you draw, that spiritual place, that holy place, that magical place, and how it affects him, even if he isn't wanting that to happen. I think that's really a powerful part of the novel.
Thank you, Jackie. I mean, that's something that I worked really hard, and it left me with sleepless nights in terms of just trying to do it right and trying to do justice to the place. And trying to make it interesting for the reader as well, which is really key for the kind of the ordinary kind of crime reader in the US or Australia that doesn't know the island, that it would still be entertaining, it would still function as a crime novel, as a generic kind of commercial crime novel, but also as a metaphysical novel. And G.K. Chesterton had a great line that every detective story is a spiritual story, because you're bringing in morality, you're bringing in ethics, and that element is kind of is around, I think, the best crime novels. There is that sense there,
Definitely, and just to keep here a little minute and to say, I think despite Desmond's almost like lack of respect for the place, I think, again, the way you bring us to that place and the way you demonstrate to us, what being there can do, I think you maintain a respect, regardless how anybody may have a faith or not. I think there's a real sense of respect for what this space can be.
Exactly. And it just, in terms of the troubles in Northern Ireland, Maguire, not to spoil the plot, but he does come to a confessional moment of truth telling, and the whole idea of the metaphysical novel plays with kind of notions of the truth. How reliable is the truth? And is it subjective? What forms of the truth are accepted and believed in? And I wanted to kind of pull Maguire back from the metaphysical detective world, where detectives always fail and they're always overwhelmed by uncertainty and they keep questioning but never find an answer. I wanted to bring Maguire back into the kind of the generic kind of detective, because he's a good detective, and he comes to this moment of truth telling, which restores order and brings an element of coherence to the plot and explains a lot of what has happened. So I wanted to kind of satisfy the reader, which is really important as well, that the reader isn't frustrated by me playing around too much and unraveling the conventions of the
Yes.
detective novel
Yeah.
too much. That was really key, was that the reader always kept at pace and was being fed little kind of snippets of answers and rewarded in that sense. But the key thing was that Maguire comes to this moment of truth telling. And truth telling can only be subjective, really, in terms of the troubles, that there is no kind of totalizing narrative of
Yes.
rights and wrongs. Kind of the truth just is a matter of individuals coming to terms with their implications, their involvement, their level of guilt, and telling the truth. And Maguire does that.
I appreciate what you said earlier as well, because to set a to set a narrative against this backdrop
Mm,
is risky.
it is
And I think,
many different levels.
yeah, yeah, and I just wondered, as you developed the story, as you went on this journey yourself, were you ever at a point where you thought, I'm not sure that my career can take this, because having played it safe so far, being on either side of that historical period, yeah,
Yeah,
to
yeah.
to I mean, to go
To
deep,
actually
deep,
plunge into it.
deep in this, yeah, yeah.
Yes.
I, I,
The way I kind of thought that what will save me is if I keep the focus really, really narrow and confined to one conflicted, guilty individual.
Mhm,
That okay, refer the politics is in the background, but
mhm.
they keep the stage really confined to this detective, and that he's the one that's implicated and he's the one that has to investigate, so that I kind of be fair to both sides. Because I
Yes.
live where I grew up. I live surrounded by neighbours, by people who were involved in the troubles, who had opposing beliefs,
Mhm.
and it's very important that I keep kind of living in this community. Um,
Yes. Yeah.
one of the first things, I mean, as a journalist, I had a good kind of Facebook following, with local kind of personalities, and when Disappeared, the first novel, started to get critical acclaim, and I kind of put up on Facebook. One of the first people to like it was the local leader of the Orange Order, which is kind of a loyalist kind
Mm.
of organization. The next person was a Sinn Féin politician. And I thought to myself, isn't this great that this book is bringing together the two sides? And
Mhm.
then I woke up in the middle of the night afterwards in a sweat thinking, no, what they're actually doing here is letting me know that they know who I am and what I'm doing. And I mean, the thing is that people come to you with stories. If you kind of live in a place as a journalist and an author, if you live in a tightly knit community where everybody knows you and knows your family, and people do come to my door with stories, sometimes they're terrible stories
Mhm.
that you could never craft
Mhm.
a novel out of. But other times, there's that kind of little magpie on your shoulder that's desperately looking for the twist or that little bit of nuance to help finish that page for the day. And sometimes those stories just serendipitously do the job and fit in perfectly. And I have followed those stories, whether or not I've been used as propaganda or not. That's something that keeps me awake at night and keeps me more tense and kind of anxious and thinking over the story, which isn't good for my mental health, but it's good for the story itself. Because the more time you spend, I think, weighing up the consequences and deliberating over something, it makes
Mhm.
for a better book, a better novel. And I
Mm.
hope that Turncoat has that sense of really kind of worked out um, ideas of justice and fairness,
Mm. Yeah, the balance within that, I think, is uh, is so important, and I think the way that you have, you know, the way you've worked in order to not make sweeping moral judgments.
Hmm.
I think
Exactly.
it's
Yeah.
vital to take a step back and to be able to look at at what happened, and I think your work
Mm,
allows that safe space.
mm.
you know.
And that is so key. It's the idea
Mhm.
of the comfortable armchair
Yes,
for the reader to sit
yes.
in, and that is so key that
Mm-hmm.
you have to look after the reader.
Mm-hmm.
You know, this idea that kind of fiction as diversion or entertainment is somehow not as worthy as kind of literature that challenges. But I think to me, to entertain the reader, to entertain them with ideas and
Mm-hmm.
insights, you know, to be emotionally
Yes,
resonant at all times and to
exactly.
transport them with their scenes
Mm-hmm.
and and it's that kind of just keeping that emotional resonance going and that involvement with the reader.
Mm-hmm. Quite, again, you mentioned it earlier, but the idea of, this novel, so Turncoat at home and abroad, the desire for a wide reading public around this novel,
Mm,
and that it
mm,
neither cause offence at home, nor that it abroad, it fails, that people don't understand. So to
very
hit
good.
that sweet
Yes,
spot.
that's very well put, Jackie. I mean, that has kind of summed up my dilemmas and my kind of anxieties around fiction for
Mhm,
the last 12 years or so,
mhm,
is, as you say, hitting that sweet spot. And only for the crime novel. The crime novel gives you that potential to write in a universal form that is understood, that there's enough there for readers in the US, say, or Australia or Canada or wherever to kind of, okay, well, I know the character, okay, and there's that motif of the labyrinth, that motif there, but they're seeing it reinvented in a new landscape,
yeah.
whether in a new social context,
Mhm,
you know, which rewards them. So it's the mixture of the familiarity with the new and the
mhm.
unfamiliar.
Which, yeah, so beautiful. Now, um, I don't know how many people as well watching, uh, would know another undertaking that you've been doing, that has just recently culminated in another cause for celebration. So not only a published author, but we should really be calling you Dr. Quinn now. And
Yes,
yeah.
it sounds like a bad 80s TV show, I know. So,
Oh,
but no,
no.
I mean, and it's thanks to, as I said, I wasn't the best English literature student back in my undergraduate days, but thanks to Celsius dealing my crime fiction, I got myself onto a PhD with funding from Northern Bridge, and it was based on metaphysical detective fiction. Um, and I remember talking to my supervisor and kind of confessing to how I was as a student and how I spent all those days up in the on the 10th floor of the library. And he said to me, actually, that probably was the best preparation you could have got
Yeah,
as a writer,
yeah,
was to actually go and do that, to
yeah,
go off piste in a way, you know. So
definitely.
I'm delighted just this week that I passed, and at the end of the Viva, I was invited on to teach on the masters at
Mm,
Queen's University as well in prose fiction. So
wonderful.
I kind of feel a wee bit, especially as a crime writer, as a genre writer, that I've been kind of running with the commercial hounds, but now I'm kind of also there with the foxes of kind of a highbrow kind of fiction in a way as well. That I've somehow got myself kind of over that border, that line, you know. But and you know, and really it is thanks to crime fiction and to the kind of to my success there that has kind of transported me here. So I have to thank Celsius daily for that, really, you know, because it's a great opportunity and one of those lovely examples of the crime fiction kind of world opening up doors, you know, that are unexpected.
And I would be keen, when we are able to meet face to face, because it will be, of course, a few months, whenever down the line. I would love
Mm,
to hear you talk about how, as that lecturer, now delivering on an MA, how you have affected students, and how, in being in discussion with them, how that might affect the way you approach your writing. But back
mm,
to Turncoat, because before we conclude our time together, So you've mentioned already that you send Desmond to Station Island, but in a beautiful piece that you wrote for the Irish Times, and would it be okay to include that link on
Oh,
would
great,
that be allowed? Is
fantastic.
that okay? Because
Yes,
I would,
yes, wonderful.
because I'd love people to be able to read that as well. It's you know, I think it's a wonderful complementary piece to read in the novel.
Yes, it kind of explains things a
Hmm.
little bit.
Had you visited that island before, or was this your first visit there?
It was my first visit there. I'd always been too much of a coward to go there because it's, I mean, my friends went there after they did their A levels. It was kind of a rite of passage
Hmm.
to go there and do the 3 days of fasting and not sleeping and just praying. So it's quite a popular practice. My grandfather did it numerous times. Family members have done it as well. But I was too worried that I'd be carried off, in a having fainted from the lack of food or whatever, But as part of the research for the book, I thought I must go there. And as I kind of mentioned earlier, I had a good idea that this would be maybe a stepping stone for my character, Maguire,
Hmm.
and that the labyrinth would be the border, kind of switching in and out of the border and between different identities. But I went there, and I remember one of the first things as I was kind of trying I mean, I went to pray as well. I went to take part in the rituals, but I kind of obviously the imposter sign was hanging over my head because I remember the priest he was on the island, came over to me almost right away and said, "Is this your first time here?" And I said, "Oh well, does it show that much?" And he said, "No, no, no." But he then asked me, would I carry the cross? Would I take part in one of the rituals on the island? So it was almost as if he was pulling me into the fold, into the
Mm.
flock. Um, and I also, as part of the ritual, you have to go to a confession, and it was the first confession I've been in many years. And when I told the priest that, they said to me, "Oh, don't worry, we'll go easy on you." And I give him kind of a list that I'd used back when I was a child at confession. And he said to me, "Is that all?" And then he started firing a few probing questions at me. And I thought to myself, and this is you going easy. So,
Mhm.
so I had a lot more than I kind of bargained for. I mean, you can't go there and be an outsider because, like Maguire, you're pulled in inevitably over those period of those days that you're there, and the many hours you spend there. So it's definitely an experience. I mean, and the funny thing is, since the books come out, I have friends who are atheists or who aren't Catholic who ask me, "Can anybody go there?" Because I'd
Mm.
love to go there and experience those kind of that special light that I've described in the book. So it's I mean, it was a lovely escape. It's a good way to get away from all the mental distractions, and that was what I found toughest. It wasn't the fasting or the lack of sleep. It was the boredom almost. It was switching off from all the mental
Yeah.
distractions we have these days. That I found toughest really. So it was a great quick. I mean, I did feel rejuvenated when I left. And
Mhm.
there definitely is something about those rituals that are rejuvenating and energizing.
I just wonder if it's true that either people without faith or people who are not of the Catholic faith, if it's possible for people to do that pilgrimage, then your writing may be single-handedly responsible for a large a large
For
growth
a
in,
large following, yes. But
yeah.
hopefully, I mean, and it is, I mean, it's the landscape. It's the kind of, I mean, I'm a Celt, and I kind of I've always worshipped trees and the landscape, and there's definitely a special light there. And before it became a Christian pilgrimage site, it was a kind of a Celtic site
Yes.
where myths and rituals were performed and enacted, because there's just something in that mood enhancing landscape, the darkness, the light, the changeability of it. It's such a fickle landscape, and there's a powerful connection between your inner landscape and the outer landscape and when it changes, you change inside. Something that I've always tried to write about is that link, especially if you know a landscape well or you're familiar with it, and when it changes before you, how you change inside, and you can be uplifted by just rain suddenly falling, or a mist coming out, or or the sun breaking through. It's that lovely sense of being transported, even though you're in the same place. That the landscape can do. And as I kind of said earlier, all I really ever wanted to write about was this kind of Ulster landscape, this kind of dramatic power that I've always felt.
As you were speaking, that is the thing that I was thinking, that we started talking about the way you first got into writing, and that you were writing about rain, and the nature, the landscape, and even though this novel, it has some hard hitting moments and questions, that mental torment that's there. I think it is the magic of the landscape and the magic of that going to another space.
Mm. Thank you,
That
Jackie. You summed it up
you know
wonderfully there, and it's that transportive kind
mm,
of effect of landscape and words. I mean, words and landscape have that power to transport and uplift us, and that's, to me, that's what really key about writing,
mm,
is that you create that window into that landscape for readers.
mm. I think you do that beautifully. I would again just highly recommend, um I would recommend the whole of your series, but if people aren't familiar with you, it's almost like take Turncoat and get to know your writing, and then enjoy the other series. I think
Yes, yeah.
that's the way that I would do it. um
Mm.
I am aware of the time, um as ever. It's such a shame, but then I look forward to when we can resume our
Yes,
conversation, if we may.
indeed, Jackie. I look forward to continuing the conversation
Hmm.
in different times and in real time, at different events and things. So thank you very much for really having read the book and grasped so much of what I was trying to do in all my books.
A total pleasure, and again, Anthony, wishing you every success, with Turncoat, um, and yeah, and here's to more from you when we can. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Jackie. I'm looking forward to it. Thank you.
Goodbye for now. Goodbye.
Goodbye.